So anyhow, we now have a local board, and so the local board has certain delegations. Now, the local board is delegations that the old Auckland City Council used to have in terms of dealing with some of the resource management issues. And it's probably fair to say, and you'll be the first ones to recognise, that fairly and in a balanced way making decisions around resource management issues in Waiheke Island are pretty challenging. There's a whole lot of differing views generally about the way to go forward in this island.
That's why they don't notify.
There's always been a pretty good tension around that. So what I'd like to hear from Faye is just a very brief reflection on the decision from the local board's view, and then any further learnings from the board's view. Now, as I said to you at the outset, I recognise the challenge they've got in doing their job, and I support the board. I was here on the day the board was inaugurated, and it's a devilish difficult job. They depend on the best advice, so we've heard some of those reflections here today. And secondly, they've got to make their own judgments, and particularly the chair who leads it. So, you know, everyone's going to have a different view about that. So, you know, my position is to support the position of the board, unless a board, and I'm just not talking about Waiheke, unless a board has got it completely wrong in law. Otherwise they've got a delegation. I want to respect that and try and do my very best to make the super city work by having local boards doing local things and the governing body looking after the regional side. So,
okay, thanks, Len. But I want to start at the beginning because it's this has started long before this consent was given out. So what's happened, in my view, is at the time of the subdivision, an initial error has been made because that property has included this little pocket on the coastal edge. Now, you might like to say that during the original subdivision that should not have been accepted. So what's happened is it does include 3/4 of the well, according to my advice from planners. It includes a lot of the coastal area and includes this bit behind the beach. So we've got the historic homestead with riparian rights, so that the public can only get down there at low tide anyway, and then this small anomaly. And the anomaly, particularly in this area, is that a private landowner has purchased a piece of land which has an area you can build something up. Okay, so a subdivision has been developed that brings this particular property right down into that coastal area. Now, when the subdivision was done, you'd like to think that common sense would say you leave the whole of this area, which is a natural amphitheatre, and the subdivision for this property should have been the top area, but it doesn't, and they've got this area. So then what's happened is, as Paul said during the Hauraki Gulf Islands plan, there's been an opportunity by the public, not that anyone's seen it, that, apart from Paul, that this is not a good area to have development in. So that was another opportunity to do something about it. Then there's the Auckland Regional Council Coastal Plan, which Mike knows all about. This is not scheduled, it's not a coastal protection area under the ARC plan. So it's missed out again there. And probably, personally, I think is because of what Paul's saying, because stories are not seen as the history more than buildings. And apart from the house, which I assume is scheduled, the old so the rest of it's not. So what he's saying is that when you've got an overload of the story of land, it's not recognised, and that's absolutely correct. So that's what's happened. Then along has come someone who has decided to put in an application and see what happens. Lots of people have thought about it and haven't done it, but that person has done it. And that was pre-July 2011 when the board had any input into notification or non-notification, and that notification decision was made by officers. Now, my view, as a person who's had a lot of experience as a planning commissioner, I've chaired hundreds of hearings, I've been on hundreds of hearings, and I've been involved in the district plan. My personal view, and from that background, is it should have been notified. I've got no doubt about that whatsoever. And I've said it to the Herald, and I've said it to the Gulf News and the Marketplace, and I've said it to you. It should have been notified. It wasn't. And I suppose you could say, well, it could have been notified and people could have put in submissions, which they would have, and it would have gone to perhaps independent commissioners, and it may or may not have been approved. So notifying it is no guarantee that it would have been approved as it is. So, but we don't know, we'll never know. So do we think it should have been notified? Absolutely. So it wasn't, and then as the officers said, the only ability to even question it was the judicial review, which some people in the area were informed of. I personally spoke to at least 3 neighbours, and they made a choice not to proceed with that.
For financial
You don't have a choice.
That's right. Listen, don't blame me, don't blame the messenger. I don't put in judicial reviews. I don't make the rules as to how much they cost, and I don't make the rules, which I think did put them off, which is if you are not found to be in the right, then you pay costs, and that's just something you have to talk to the government about. So in terms of notification, absolutely no doubt it should be notified.
Excuse me, Faye.
So I'll just go through the process to how we get to here. In terms of Nikki and the things, I have spent a lot of time on this, as you have yourselves, as has Mike, as has a lot of other people. I have asked the questions that Nikki in particular has asked me, and I've got back from the officers, I have to say, the opposite of what people in this room and other people not in this room have said. In terms of the well, I'm told that the vast majority is on private property. Can they drive in a fence post? Yes, there's nothing in the rules that says they can't do that. And on it goes. So it just seems that there's very... Then along comes the New Zealand Historic Places Trust, they say everything's fine. Along comes Dr. Rod Clough and Associates, they say everything's fine. I had a chat with Ngāti Power Trust representatives at a recent function I was at with them, said, what's the story? They said, we've been approached by some people from Waiheke, and to be quite honest, it's not of importance to us. So, you know, we're just dealing with all sorts of opinions and things, which is why the board has to go back to the facts, and it's not up to us to break the law. And then we come to the barging. Now, the barging, if you look at that the way we have to look at it, which means we have to make a decision based on full information, and there was nothing in that information that said that barging shouldn't happen. Turning down the barging would not make the house go away. Turning down the barging would not affect the resource consent. That would be dishonest, and we're not here to be dishonest. So, was there a valid reason to turn down the barging? No, absolutely not.
It was non-compliant on the barge, and you asked for strict conditions of compliance.
Hang on a second.
I'll answer that then.
Excuse me. In terms of approving the barging, we approved the barging because there's absolutely nothing in there that says you can't approve it. And if we hadn't, then I suppose, no, actually you can't oppose it. But if I
So there are a lot of houses of barging in the island.
well, barging's no
It's over
big
Waiheke
no
again.
big deal. Well, no, hang on a second. That's what you say. So back to...
It's not, it's what the archaeologists say, and you haven't answered what I said. It was non-compliant, was to be strictly controlled.
Would you like to let me finish, Ross? Last time you were in this room, you were so rude.
No, you left me off the speaking list. That was the rudeness.
So back to the barging.
That's true.
Just listen here.
That's true. Everything I've said is true. Not hang on.
Yeah, just, you know,
Ross,
we're over here smoking the peace pipe, Ross. I've got no extra
I don't need
criteria.
drugs.
No, we've got limited time, Ross.
I don't think we're talking about that either.
Not about you, Ross.
Yeah. We need
I haven't made it about me.
No.
We've had a good rational discussion.
Okay,
Well, I'd like that.
back to the barging, there was no reason it should not be approved. So did they comply with their conditions? Well, we hear that they did not. So the board has requested a report back from the Parks Department to say, did they comply with their conditions? And if not, is the $5,000 bond, which we placed on it, which is 5 times the usual bond, can that be taken for something like not getting the trucks off the reserves? Because a bond like that is usually taken for damage. Okay, and so that's still to come back to the board.
But the compliance officer was there when it was being done, and the things that they were conforming.
Well, that's a matter for staff.
He And the meeting, I came to a meeting here when they first started digging away the bank, and at that stage you knew nothing about the barging, and the consent for barging had been given by officers in the city. And you were very annoyed because they had no ability to give that
That's
consent.
right, that was our approval.
So, yes, so they built on the understanding of people who weren't legally entitled to give that understanding that they could barge it in. So the decision was pre-made for you.
Well, it wasn't pre-made for us. What happened is the officers had, and David can confirm this, had indicated or approved in writing, I'm not sure, that they could barge across the reserve. Probably it was me, because it's me who tends to find these things out. Said it is not your decision to make. Under the new council, under the new local boards, that is our delegated authority. It will come to us and act it.
Okay, now can we go there? And then what I want to do is just reflect. Mike, you don't have anything to say, so you might want to give your view on how we might go into the future from here, and any better ways that we can do this to reflect one, you're being able to make a decision without too much anxiety in the community, and then secondly, that the officers have maybe a clearer, better way forward for us. So.
I'd just first like to thank you, Len, and Faye, and David, Mike, and everyone here. We all get it that this is an emotive issue for our community, and especially David, I really appreciate you drawing the short straw as such and coming down and fronting up. And I think there's something about it there that's that sort of wraps up a lot of the frustration here from the community that we're at the end of 6 months of hell with respect to this application, and this is the first meaningful conversation that we've had. I've got firstly a clarification which perhaps you can help me with, which is with respect of the iwi consultation. It's my understanding that the point that iwi were asked to give any input into this development was after the works had started and the midden was dug up. Is that the case?
Yeah, that is the case.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's moving on from there. For me, with this development, I think the most significant failing of the council in respect of this is, and I've had a good look through the consent, there has been no consideration at all of the effects of this development on the public or the recreation reserve. And the thing that really struck home for me on the day that this photo was taken when we were on site, and I run a building business on the island here, I've got friends and clients all over the island that have consents held up in suburbia, in Ostend, in Oneroa, Blackpool, everywhere. And it just occurred to me that, I couldn't build this on my section in Ostend because, first up, I'd have to consider the effects of the adjacent property owner. And as I read through the consent application for this process, aside from the obvious infringements of daylight controls and whatever else, there's been a thorough consideration of the effects of the public standing on the wharf at Kennedy Point and looking across the bay. There's an argument that the Esplanade Reserve can be planted, perhaps to mitigate the effects of this development. There's an argument, there's a conversation talking about the effects of members of the public sitting in a boat in the bay. Again, this reserve is going to provide mitigation for this development. At no point in time has there been any consideration of the effects on the public on the reserve. And as soon as you have that conversation within the planning department, logically you'd walk next door and talk to the to the Parks and Recreation team. Weren't even aware of it. And that there automatically is going to trigger all of these conversations about a historic well, all of the conversations about protected middens, and the cultural values that as a community we manifest for this. And then it raises all these questions for me. If we've got a competent team of planners that are administering our district plan, which is providing for future generations on Waiheke, and the statements made in the report, they discount the amenity of this reserve based on the fact that it's remote and this adjacent property doesn't have a Esplanade Reserve in front of it. And that just seems like very short-sighted thinking, and it's certainly not the sort of thinking that I would like to think that planning officers in or, you know, the world's most livable city would be considering thinking of future generations. But for me, that sums it up. I couldn't build this on my section in Ostend in the middle of suburbia, and frankly, it's completely ruined this beautiful coastal reserve that as a city we can't afford to buy.
Okay. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for asking me to join you in the meeting. I appreciate it. This has been a most unfortunate affair, a series of very bad decisions, and a deeply flawed process. Councils are like people. Anyone can make a mistake. Make a mistake, you own up, and then you move on. Now that's what you would like to happen here today. That's the whole point, I guess, of this meeting. But that's not what's happening at all. It's not happening at all. No lessons will be learned from this. There will be no change. This decision is one of many, and it indicates, it manifests a bad culture, a deeply flawed culture in the system, well below, deeper than politicians. We just come and go. And until we change that culture, we're going to have more and more unhappy people on the island. The people here know more about this. The first thing, I heard about this fairly early because Nikki and Carl rang me up on a Monday morning that they'd heard bulldozers and what was going on. Of course, I didn't know anything about it, but that's the first notice that the public had of this. And if you, Faye has said quite rightly, it should be notified. But I don't think I heard the officers, David on behalf of management, and David represents management, he's doing his duty. I don't think you'll hear that from them. I don't think you'll hear any apology. I think we got it wrong. 50 breaches of the consent here. Is anything wrong with the process? No. The overweening influence of Martin Green. My Christmas holiday was spoiled because of a house on Padgett Street, 1870 something, and who was behind that? The Green Group.
Yes.
And you know what worries me? Ex-Auckland City Council planner, knows the people, knows the ropes, seems to have a magical way. The 6 people who got turned down in the past who wanted to do this sort of stuff, but then the 7th come along, and because they've got the right person representing it, they get it through non-notified. Now, if this was a one-off affair, I would say, let's move on. Put it behind us. Let's not get bitter. Yes, it's a very special place. It's historical in terms of Maori history and in Pākehā history. And when you look at these beaches, it reminds you that the main mode of transport in those times, early European and pre-European, was via the sea. So when the first Europeans came, they went to the same places as Maori thought were the best places for a whole lot of sensible reasons, which we probably wouldn't know half of them now because we don't do that stuff anymore. So it's a very special place, and it's been ruined. It's been raped. It's been spoiled forever. And if you think, okay, these things happen, put it behind us, heal, move on. But my concern is, and I deal with David a lot, he is the messenger from senior management to me, not so much on Waiheke things, but on historic buildings in the city, old buildings that have been torn down, non-notified. Despite what the words say, you think the words in the plans, I think you've got a case. You know, you've got the words here in the district plan, in the regional policy statement, and in the Act. But no, the planners will tell you, no, you've got that wrong. Coastal yard, you're not meant to, you're not meant to build in the coastal yard.
Yes.
You can, apparently, but you have to be a planner or a lawyer to know how you can do it. So it doesn't mean what it says. That's deeply frustrating for me, and I'm close to power, and how frustrating is it for the ordinary people? On Friday, I was representing the Mayor at a select committee hearing regarding transport, Land Transport Management Act, and at the same time, the consents committee, what's the proper name for it, David?
The hearing.
You're talking about
Hearings, so the hearings committee was making an important Waiheke decision on a coastal area, something that I had been very much involved in the Auckland Regional Council, made some sound decisions backed up by the Environment Court, but that's as far as I can tell you now, because what was a publicly notified consent that went to the Environment Court was covered at length in the Herald, is now secret. It's now non-notified because of the officer's recommendations. This is going to be repeated. And it's going to be again and again and again until there is fundamental change. And until I hear the officer saying, we got Wharetana wrong. Yes, we slipped up on the 50 breaches. And the community, the local board cannot be blamed for any of this RMA stuff. Their only position was on the Reserves Act. It wasn't to do with RMA, but I feel so strongly about this because, you know, not only am I the representative of Waiheke and Great Barrier, but also the oldest part of the city. And it seems like there's almost like a free-for-all going on in there when it comes to heritage buildings, and it's the same attitude. Now, everyone knows how important heritage buildings are, but it doesn't seem to, or historic buildings, because heritage is a technical term, character buildings, let us call them. Old buildings, valued buildings, loved buildings, landmark buildings, they're very valued by the public, but the machine doesn't take any notice of that, and when it comes to the Hauraki Gulf and the coastal area, yes, there is special protection here too, called the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park Act, and that doesn't seem to have any recognition either. My only suggestion for a solution, Mr. Mayor and ladies and gentlemen, is that this culture of non-notified, this culture of secrecy when it comes to applications has to go. There has to be a different attitude. This could have happened if there was a notified consent. Could have happened. Doubt it. I really doubt it. Because a process would have been in train that will take you up to the High Court if necessary. So I doubt it. But it could have. But at least you would have had your say. At least critical information could have come out and be given to decision makers or judges. But that was not allowed to happen, and it's not going to be allowed to happen in a whole lot of things. Yet the Resource Management Act says this. It's all about sustainable management in a way and at a rate which enable people and communities to achieve their economic, cultural, social, environmental well-being.
So
People and communities. And what has happened, the practice is to eradicate, to erase people and communities, and where it says people and communities, you put in the applicant. And so that a social contract that all of us are part of has been trashed, and these things are turned into very private business transactions, and you lot and me are out of the loop. That cannot go on. I think that's illegal, and until we change that, we're going to be having more meetings. And just to finish, I don't want to be in this negative stuff. I've only got a short time left in politics. I want to be doing positive stuff around transport and conservation, restoration of islands and stuff like that. I hate getting these complaints, and I hate having to get hold of David Oakle about old buildings in Parnell or these outrages on Waiheke coastal environment. So I don't want to be in this space, but you folks are making me, and I resent that as well. So I've got my own anger about all this stuff. That's got to change.
anyone else got anything to say?
Yes.
I have.
Sorry, one last question.
Right.
How are we going to be compensated, please?
Oh, I'm not going to answer that question.
Would you please think about it? Because I think it's important.
Yeah. Okay, it's an issue that's been raised.
I'd like to know what council, thank you for coming, great presentation, Mike, and then thanks to David. What's council going to do about it? Is it a fait accompli that it's going to stay there? We know that
it's now there.
We know
And so,
there's.
yeah, I think the reason for my being here today is to, one, understand how it happened as best I can. Secondly, to understand the dynamics of that. And thirdly, in particular, get the learnings. Now, Mike's view is that there is an endemic situation. That's not my view. My view is that there are issues that we need to deal with, in particular around notification. We are going to deal with those issues through the unitary plan process. Thirdly, my view is that we have issues relating to who we need to consult and who should be consulted through those processes. You might have a slightly or even a significantly greater degree of sensitivity to some of the communities when you are consulting than in others. For example, in dealing with issues in Piha and Waiheke, you've got a far higher level of community involvement. And so how we engage with the communities to ensure that level of consultation and involvement, I think, is something for the officers and the politicians to really reflect on. Thirdly or fourthly, so we've been at it for 2 years. We're amalgamating the ARC and 7 councils, each with their own particular interesting histories. And none of them were perfect. Whether you listen to Mike and the ARC wasn't perfect, if you listen to someone from the Auckland City Council, they weren't perfect. Manukau City Council had its own problems. Bloody hell, one of the great old buildings, residential buildings of Auckland, burnt down over the weekend because we didn't have enough protections in place to stop the damn thing from burning down. Excuse me. So, you know, there's no perfect arrangement. The one thing that we are going to try and do over the next few months, in particular with the unitary plan draft work going on, and then into the years ahead, is put in place a regime, a process that people can actually genuinely trust, or at least have reasonable faith in. One of the things that I have become intimately involved in, right at the outset of this, was to make some calls around things like 2 Rural Street. And what was most frustrating about that was that we had a process in place that I didn't like. But I had to abide by it because it was the process that was in place. And you've got to respect it, because if people don't respect, whether it's a business, the community, or whoever, don't respect the process in place, or if it's not respected, then you've really got a flawed situation. So what we're trying to do now is take an amalgam of the cultures of those 7 councils plus the ARC, the very best out of all that, and put in place a process that, one, we trust.
Cumulative effects?
Hang on. And then secondly, out of that, on the basis that we trust the process, everyone's input up front. My style has always been, if we've got a problem, get them around the table before we even get the thing, before we even get the application in. And so this issue that the officer has pointed out, where it was a non-notified, and the viewers, and it hasn't been an open, hey, we were dead wrong, it should have been notified, and Faye has basically delivered that message. But where we, in particular in the areas of real sensitivity, go for notification, or even partial notification, but an involvement of the broader community in that discussion, is a process that we'll start going through and hopefully put in place. We've got to make some decisions about where it's appropriate to do that or not. You know, I said at the start of the meeting, there is a balance here between the public good and person's personal rights. My home is their castle. Okay, so we're trying to, that's right, so we're trying to find that balance.
What we have now is, okay, there's a lot of should, and the system's broken, and there hasn't been due process followed, there's been a total lack of transparency. Yeah, we could dissertate that for many days on, you know, what we do and how we mitigate that. What can we do now to resolve the polarising activity that this building is making in the community? Right now, it seems to be, okay, if this guy has the audacity to build right in front of a reserve, you can imagine the intimidation that public are going to have on that reserve.
Cameras on it.
There's LED cameras, 12 round-the-clock security cameras, security lights. He's got security guards living there 24/7. We bought the property right next to it, all right? I take exception to some of your comments, Faye, with regards to the subdivision. That was not the previous owner's intention. The intention was always to have a building platform up above that big Wharetana tree at the top. The owner of this property now is a recidivist offender, Burwood Crescent, up north, and now this, Martin Green, also, hatchet man to the wealthy. Come in, and what we have here is potentially a pseudo-privatisation of a public reserve by stealth by this landowner, who I actually understand, if we take him to court, the reserve can be overturned in legal title to a point where it becomes an apron or something, and then it's a strip, a coastal strip, that then it can potentially be taken by this landowner because it's deemed to be insignificant. Interesting point here, on our title for our 8-acre block which runs behind there, it says that we cannot object to the owner of that front block ever wanting to put in a jetty. Now, how can a guy put in a jetty? This is the original old jetty, right?
Oh, yeah.
How can someone put in a jetty when he doesn't own that bit of land? He can put it in, but everyone can use it. Holyoake has said to us personally, I don't like sharing, right? He wants us to put our own driveway in. We've got a right of way. We've also got an easement over this property for our personal access to the beach. His MO is he doesn't want to share. So I would say he's very cleverly structured this whole development, so he'll end up getting the reserve by stealth. He'll put his jetty in and say goodbye. Now, unless council with you at the helm are going to do something and say, hey, there's a major stuff up here, let's get it sorted. Let's take the height to boundary issues off. Let's get everything sorted here. You know, step up to the mark and say, we're going to sort this out. We're going to put a fence. Community here, we want a fence, 1.8 metres high, right across the front. Let's do it now before he has as of use rights of having that clear vision. Don't let him.
It says on the plan, the initial plan, it calls the reserve the front lawn.
Yeah.
Yes, the lawn area in front of the
Existing lawn. I'd like to say something now, because you people want to say you want to talk about facts, but I've heard a lot of other stuff and a lot of it's interesting. But I just want to give you 2 facts. And they are, originally back in here, the archaeologists, Historic Places Trust, did a brief investigation, their words, and a few probes here, and then they came away, because that's where the boathouse, and I understand it was only going to be a small one then, was going to go, and they went away and they recommended that any development, and at that stage they thought the development was up here, going to go on the top, and that comes from Greg Walter, the case manager. Any development required further archaeological survey. Right, this whole thing was not probed inside, up here, round there, right around the back, inside scheduled archaeological surrounds. Okay, so they hit middens. Wow, what a surprise. Stop work. The second point is that when they changed a little fireplace back in here into a cabana, which was going to be 2.5 metres by 2 metres, and the dig out was over 7 metres, and the facing, which was meant to be a maximum of 4 metres sheer, was over 5 metres, and this was brought to the council, Anthony Yates and Kim Lewis, on the 1st of May, and Kim reiterated it's over 4 metres. I said, yes, what's the quarrying height? Well, that was unconsented works. All this area here is within geotech surrounds that required footing establishments and things. There was no geotech report done on the cabana. Of course, it brought the hill down, and it was unconsented works as well. And what did the council do? And what did the Historic Places Trust do? Nothing.
Actually, council did. We got your officers at our place saying that it was our stormwater runoff that caused this slip.
And you deny
I'm the guy.
They put it on you.
And I have a formal complaint against the auditor, or to the Auditor General, against your council, Len, because we have had a guts full of your officers turning up and saying it's our fault, saying that our runoff of our land has caused the slip, when this guy has left throughout months over winter, decimated bank open. The other thing I'd like to know, Monkey Apple, Acmina, right? This entire bank up here is Acmina. It's a noxious weed. It's not one that we can say you have to remove. The problem is his septic tank feeds all this Acmena,
That's right.
right? Acmena will decimate any native plant underneath it by its very nature. So apparently there's a planting plan. The planting plan is a complete and utter joke. It is a complete and utter waste of breath and time and money, just so this guy can get what he wants. What I'd like is all that Acmena gone. On Ellen's block or on Rothschild's block, there's 2 huge Acmena trees. They're all self-seeded from that. Right? The thing is, if this is going to stay, we were originally told by Holyoke that he was putting in a boat shed and an outdoor fireplace. Ta-da! That's what we've got. Now, I think, you know, a super city, you need to actually have some strength to say, okay, whoever in our mix, we got it wrong. Put your hand up.
Yes.
What can we do now to get it right? Well, what we would like to see is to say, you know, a boat shed, single story, an outdoor fireplace, set it back. Everything else, take it away.
Yes.
Yes.
Put it up the top. Put it up the top. When that land was subdivided, it was originally owned by Danneman, okay? There was always a building site at the top. Don Robertson owned the land, we bought it off him. Don had some vision to say, rather than giving one landowner access to the beach, I'll give it till 2. So in order to cut off a very a very saleable coastal strip, he had to make a minimum amount of land. He put an easement over Holyoke's land for us down, so we got access to the beach down through this side here, and allowed this front pocket of land to have access to the beach. It was never intended to build down there.
Okay, well, it's
Right.
now there.
And it's now there. What can we do about it? Because
Visitor facility.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to give you any sort of indication today as to whether or not there'll be any change to what's actually there at the moment. I mean, what's happened has happened. And, I mean, the consent is in place. Some of the issues that you've raised in terms of Acmena and stuff like that, all fair comment. And clearly, it's engagement with the reserve. Issues relating to anything to do with the jetty, well, that's absolute public land, so I can't see how that would ever happen. So all of those sort of issues of appropriate management of that space to ensure public access and appropriate public access to the grass preserve area, it's not someone's front lawn. There are a whole bunch of people around our Waiheke who do think that that's their front lawn, but that is not front lawn. And so that's the access way for all of the community. The fact that there is a state of general unhappiness between you and your neighbour is not good either. It's a total waste and a poor use of stress and your well-being. So that shouldn't be the case. And if there's anything that I can do to resolve that issue or help to resolve that issue, I can. But I don't want to turn back the pages of history and all of a sudden start issuing edicts over the top of the local board about what should and should not happen with that place there. You know, we've arrived at a position where people have done what they should have done within their appropriate jurisdiction. There has been an issue as to whether or not notification should have been notified or non-notified. You can't go back on that one now, but there are learnings from that. So the first one is the issue of whether or not you notify a coastal margin as this in future purpose. And Faye's view on behalf of the local board is that it should have been in this instance, and in hindsight she may be absolutely right. And so in that situation, for the rules that we are going to put in place and for the way in which we rule from this point in, it sounds to me like, and according to the officer, it will be notified. So I think that's a fair comment. Secondly, there are issues about who should be consulted, notified, non-notified, the issue of iwi consultation and the point that you raised. So we've got work to do around that to make sure that that happens right up front. The issue of where the Historic Places Trust were. Well, we've had a whole range of issues. If you think you've got problems, so have we. The Historic Places Trust are completely under-resourced. It's our national body and they don't have the resource to actually give appropriate advice, and they do sometimes not engage themselves in it. And it's certainly the case with Queen's Wharf, for example. And we've had a number of instances where we wanted them in, give us a strong bit of advice as to what we do here, and they don't. And or can't, because they don't have the resource. So You know, what we can do is get onto the government and say, for God's sake, you may be cutting your costs everywhere else, but for these guys, please give them some sort of funding so that we can get the appropriate level of advice and help us in some of our decision making.